He used to be Sam Bankman-Fried, and now he is Sam Bankman jailed. A Manhattan jury has found Sam Bankman-Fried guilty of 2 counts of wire fraud and 5 conspiracy crimes. The verdict came at the eve of trial, where Bankman-Fried testified that he knew nothing about crypto, that he was too busy and lazy to get haircuts, and he thinks of himself as a smart guy in many ways, but not always, and that he could not recall making dozens of statements that he actually did make on video or audio. Now, company executives Caroline Ellison, Gary Wang, and Nishad Singh pleaded guilty and testified against him. Bankman-Fried and his 3 co-conspirators have come a long way since their shared frat house in the Bahamas. Bankman-Fried is facing decades in prison, and the government isn't even done with him yet. So today we're going to talk about what happened at the trial of Sam Bankman-Fried. Now, as you probably know, FTX was a crypto exchange founded by Sam Bankman-Fried and friends. FTX customers deposited money at FTX, believing that the company was following basic risk management practices. However, FTX secretly loaned billions in customer money to its affiliated crypto trading firm Alameda Research, which was led by Caroline Ellison. Alameda did not post collateral for those loans from FTX, and when the bottom dropped out of the crypto market in 2022, Alameda lost a lot of money that belonged to FTX customers. Those customers weren't able to get their money back out. And FTX and its principals lied to customers about the entire scheme, creating fake spreadsheets, backdating staking fees, and withdrawing massive amounts of cash to fund their luxurious lifestyles. And as I explained in the last video about FTX, the company's implosion led to swift action by 3 federal agencies. And the United States Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York indicted Bankman-Fried for wire fraud and conspiracy to commit wire fraud against FTX customers, wire fraud and conspiracy to commit wire fraud against Alameda Research lenders, conspiracy to commit securities fraud against FTX investors, conspiracy to commit commodities and fraud against FTX customers, and conspiracy to commit money laundering. Now, Bankman-Fried's friends and co-executives took plea deals to testify against him. Gary Wang, a co-founder of FTX, pleaded guilty to 4 counts of wire fraud and conspiracy to commit wire fraud, commodities fraud, and securities fraud. Nishad Singh, the former director of engineering, pleaded guilty to 6 conspiracy charges, and Caroline Ellison pleaded guilty to 7 counts of fraud and conspiracy and is facing about 50 years in prison, but has a cooperation agreement that could lead to her serving far less time or none at all. Additionally, the Securities Exchange Commission, or SEC, charged SBF Ellison and other executives with violations of the Securities Act and of the Exchange Act. Now, the Commodities Futures Trading Commission also filed fraud charges against the group, and those cases are still pending. And believe it or not, that was just the beginning of the bad news for Bankman-Fried. The government filed a superseding indictment in March of 2023, which charged him with multiple counts of foreign bribery, conspiracy, and bank fraud that were scheduled for a separate trial due to start in March of 2024. Now, obviously, Sam Bankman-Fried is going to need a good lawyer for his appeal, but if you want a great lawyer, my firm, the Eagle team, can help. If you've been in a car crash, suffered a data breach, or have a workers' comp issue or social security disability, we can represent you or help find you the right attorney who can. Because it's so important to talk to a lawyer right away so you can get the best representation. So just click on the link in the description for a free consultation with my team. Because you don't just need a legal team, you need the Eagle team. The link is down below. And as you may recall, Bankman-Fried was initially under house arrest at his parents' home after posting a $250 million bond, but then he got caught asking the general counsel of an FTX affiliate to have a constructive relationship and vet things with each other. The lawyer was known as witness number 1 in the indictment, so that was a really bad idea. Next, Bankman-Fried leaked portions of Caroline Ellison's private diary to a New York Times reporter, which prosecutors said was an attempt to intimidate her. Judge Kaplan said that Bankman-Fried tried to cover his tracks by meeting the reporter in person at his parents' home, and consequently he was remanded to jail. At Bankman-Fried's New York trial, prosecutors alleged that he misappropriated and embezzled billions of dollars, which he spent on expensive real estate, private jets, political contributions, and celebrity endorsements. According to prosecutors, Bankman-Fried was the mastermind behind FTX and its related entities. He gave customers, investors, and media the false impression that customer funds deposited with FTX were safe and that there was a firewall between FTX and Alameda Research. Witnesses said that Bankman-Fried was fully aware of the relationship between the 2 companies and that he knowingly allowed customers to deposit their money into bank accounts that actually belonged to Alameda. Former FTX Chief Technology Officer Gary Wang testified that Bankman-Fried directed him to implement changes in FTX's computer code that would give Alameda special privileges, such as a $65 billion line of credit and an exemption from being automatically liquidated should its positions lose value. This enabled the theft of the funds. Of course, the star witness for the prosecution was Caroline Ellison, who is also Bankman-Fried's ex-girlfriend. She claimed that Bankman-Fried told her to make up fake balance sheets. When one of Alameda's lenders wanted financial information, Ellison asked Bankman-Fried what to do. At this point, it was 2022, crypto was crashing, and Alameda had secretly borrowed $10 billion from FTX's customers and loaned $5 million back to FTX entities. Of course, these transactions had been concealed from lenders and customers, and Bankman-Fried needed them to stay that way. Ellison testified that Bankman-Fried told her to prepare 7 alternative balance sheets. Ellison testified, quote, "He suggested I should prepare some alternative ways of presenting the information and send it to him. I understood him to be directing me to come up with ways to conceal things in our balance sheet we both agreed would look bad." Bankman-Fried told her to send the lender balance sheet number 7, which didn't disclose money taken from FTX customers. The balance sheet made it look as if Alameda had around $10 billion in liabilities rather than the $15 billion. Looking at the spreadsheets, it should come as no surprise that Ellison agreed to flip on Bankman-Fried. Not surprisingly, the only way to get a huge reduction in her sentence was to cooperate with prosecutors, and so Ellison testified for 13 hours against Bankman-Fried. Ellison told the jury that Bankman-Fried asked her to break the law. The prosecutor asked, "When you were working at Alameda, did you commit any crimes?" And she replied, "Yes, we did." Of course, the biggest crime they committed was using FTX customer funds to make loan repayments for Alameda Research, and Ellison described this as Sam's decision. She said he repeatedly directed her to, quote, "use FTX customer funds to repay our loans." Gary Wang and Nishad Singh gave similar testimony. So prosecutors argued that Bankman-Fried was the mastermind behind a $10 billion fraud. He claimed he didn't realize that the customer funds were used illegally until right before the company collapsed in November of 2022. Of course, here he is in December of 2022 saying he had no idea things were breaking bad.
I didn't ever try to commit fraud on anyone. I was excited about the prospects of FTX a month ago.
So his defense had 2 main themes. First, that he might have made mistakes, but he was such a super nerd that he didn't know any better. The crypto market was volatile and new, and they were making so much money it was hard to even keep track of it. He argued he was detached from day-to-day decisions and his subordinates were to blame. And the second theme was that Ellison was the power behind the throne. She was the one who made the careless decisions, leaving Bankman-Fried to clean up her mess. For that defense to work, Bankman-Fried's lawyer, Mark Cohen, would have to hurt Ellison on cross-examination, but the cross-examination was, by all accounts, a disaster. There were reports that the lawyer repeatedly changed topics, changed dates of discussion, often seemingly at random, and he failed to knock holes in her testimony, making Judge Kaplan so, quote, puzzled and impatient that he repeatedly asked Cohen where he was going with his questions or what exactly he was talking about. Which, yeah, is not an ideal cross-examination. And Ellison's testimony destroyed both of Bankman-Fried's narratives. Bankman-Fried and Ellison were not only keeping track of all that cash, they were inventing new balance sheets to conceal their fraud. And of course, the company did keep one balance sheet that appears to be real. You can see it here where it's labeled main. The main balance sheet contains the real numbers that only FTX and Alameda were allowed to see. And the other tabs show the alternative spreadsheets. Although the details of this case are complicated, prosecutors had a pretty clean argument to make to the jury. These people knew the numbers and lied about them in order to deliberately mislead lenders and customers. Balance sheet number 7 deleted some things to make it look like the company was more liquid and less leveraged. And that is, fraud. And prosecutors played a recording of the all-hands meeting that Ellison held in November of 2022 when they were trying to sell FTX to save Alameda and FTX from bankruptcy. And an employee actually asked Ellison whether the decision to borrow FTX customer funds was a YOLO decision. And Ellison said no, it was done over a period of years. This countered Bankman-Fried's narrative that everything just got frantic at the end of the waning months of 2022. And speaking of YOLO, Bankman-Fried testified in his own defense. Now, this is always a gamble, but it's especially risky in a case where the person on trial has given so many public interviews after his arrest, which is something the prosecutors exploited on cross-examination. But, when things are going very, very poorly, sometimes you have to take a Hail Mary. But Bankman-Fried's testimony on direct was that he wasn't aware of everything that was happening, and by the time it imploded, he was frantically trying to understand what was going on. He appointed Ellison as CEO of Alameda in 2021, and then stepped away from his involvement in Alameda Research, according to him. But on November 7th, 2022, as customers demanded their money back, he tweeted, "FTX is fine, assets are fine." And this was portrayed as another attempt to mislead customers. So prosecutors argued that Bankman-Fried used Alameda and FTX as a slush fund that he could use for personal loans and investments. Bankman-Fried denied that. His story was that most of FTX's users opted into spot margin trading, which is a risky system that allows for highly leveraged cryptocurrency trades. Significant losses were an inherent risk of spot margin trading, especially if other risk management standards weren't followed. And Bankman-Fried contended that Alameda was just another trader on the spot margin system, and that the crypto market crash created a perfect storm that drained customer accounts. But as prosecutors demonstrated, Alameda wasn't just another trader who was treated like everybody else. And Bankman-Fried admitted that Alameda was a trader, a stablecoin converter, and a liquidity provider. He argued that there was nothing wrong with Alameda playing multiple roles, but as the prosecutor pointed out, Bankman-Fried personally owned 90% of Alameda, plus a big stake in FTX. He was making money through every one of Alameda's functions. And Bankman-Fried used Alameda to launch FTX. And before FTX had its own bank accounts, Bankman-Fried wired customer deposits into an account owned by Alameda because it had an easier time opening accounts with banks. And most of FTX's users were individuals, but Alameda's main sub-account had a $65 billion line of credit, which effectively allowed the crypto hedge fund to borrow unlimited amounts of money. So he wasn't alarmed by the fact that Alameda consistently had a negative balance of $2 billion in 2021. Bankman-Fried argued that the company had other assets outside of FTX, but the same was not true for all of the other FTX users who did not have an unlimited credit line. The prosecutor pointed out that Alameda's largest account wasn't even involved in the spot margin trading program, meaning that its losses shouldn't have impacted other accounts at all. And regarding that special code that Gary Wang claimed Bankman-Fried told him to put into the code of FTX, Bankman-Fried testified that he asked Wang and Singh to prevent Alameda from accidentally being liquidated, but didn't know that this code actually enabled Alameda to carry out a negative balance. And prosecutors argued that Bankman-Fried deliberately portrayed himself as a kind of pinball wizard for the crypto crowd with his cargo shorts, wild hair, and habit of playing video games during meetings. Ellison said that this was a ruse designed to pry money from investors who liked the idea of an eccentric genius. Ellison said that he thought his hair had been very valuable, and he had gotten big bonuses at Jane Street because of his hair. The prosecutor asked him to verify a quote reported by the New York Times where he said, quote, "I honestly think it's negative EV, estimated value, for me to cut my hair. I think it's important for people to think I look crazy." So the U.S. attorney tried to show the jury that Bankman-Fried had two different stories about his role in Alameda and FTX. Before the crash, he claimed that FTX used solid risk management protocols and that he was involved in every aspect of the business. And after FTX and Alameda collapsed, he claimed that he was just an innocent bystander who acted in good faith, but was in over his head and couldn't control what other executives did. The prosecutors confronted him with dozens of statements he made on the record to various media outlets, and Bankman-Fried repeatedly said that he did not recall making those statements. And by the end of his testimony, he answered, "I do not recall," more than 100 times on the witness stand, even when being confronted with actual video and audio tape. And former FTX executives testified that he ordered them to spend customer money on real estate and other fun stuff. Bankman-Fried repeatedly said that he didn't remember giving those instructions, and the jury obviously didn't believe Bankman-Fried had a memory problem. So the jury convicted Bankman-Fried on all 7 counts of the indictment. It was a complicated case, but the jury only needed a few hours to reach a unanimous verdict. You might have noticed that Bankman-Fried's conviction happened less than 1 year after the companies filed for bankruptcy on November 11, 2022, which is lightning speed for a white-collar trial. In comparison, it took more than 3.5 years to bring Elizabeth Holmes to trial. Now, the statutory maximum sentence is around 115 years, but as LegalEagle viewers know, the federal sentencing guidelines will determine his sentence, not anywhere near the maximum. You can watch Scala break down the factors the guidelines take into consideration, but the main factors are the scale of the crimes and the amounts stolen and the criminal history of the defendant. Now, Bankman-Fried doesn't have a criminal history, but the sheer scale of the fraud was obviously huge, and he lied and tried to cover everything up. So realistically, Judge Kaplan could sentence him to 15 to 25 years in prison plus restitution. Judges retain discretion to consider the impact of white-collar fraud on the victims. Elizabeth Holmes was sentenced to 11 years, whereas Bernie Madoff got a 150-year sentence. And although Holmes ripped off investors, she also scammed people who thought they were getting legitimate tests done. Madoff's victims, on the other hand, included numerous small investors. Sentencing is scheduled for March of 2024, which is right before the next trial is expected to begin. So while SBF is going to jail for the foreseeable future, there's still a lot out there on the internet that can hurt you, which is where today's sponsor, NordVPN, comes in. Because you know incognito mode isn't actually incognito, right? Because with Nord's no logs policy, your internet service provider doesn't get to snoop on what you're searching, and neither does NordVPN. Now, I especially like to use Nord while I'm traveling and using unfamiliar networks, which we all tend to do this time of year. And Nord is more than just a VPN because it comes with a whole suite of threat protection tools. For example, if you follow some of your favorite creators on social media, you might have heard the stories of a channel getting hacked, basically a creator losing access to a successful attack or a leaked password. In fact, Alex's Corner, one of our Nebula friends, recently got their channel stolen and turned into a repository for cryptocurrency scam videos. But NordVPN's threat protection includes specific features to warn you about phishing links, as well as features like a blocker for malicious ads and dark web monitoring to alert you if your passwords have been leaked. And of course, NordVPN is a great VPN. With Nord, you can surf the web anonymously and your location stays private. It allows me to set my location all over the world, which lets me access different versions of my favorite websites. And when I'm out of the country and I try to connect with my Gmail and a bunch of other things that I'm logged into, all of those accounts usually would just freak out and tell me that I'm being hacked. So So now I just reroute my connection to the US and my Gmail and everything else is perfectly happy. And not only is Nord the fastest VPN on the planet, but you get 24/7 customer support to help you whenever you need it and a 30-day money-back guarantee for all users. So give NordVPN a try by clicking the link that's on screen right now or down in the description. Every purchase of the 2-year plan will receive 4 bonus months on top, and that's completely risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. So click on the link below to get up to 4 months free with a huge discount and a free 30-day money-back guarantee with NordVPN. After that, click on this link over here for more Legal Eagle, or I'll see you in court.